designee here today. How are you, sir? Any opening remarks? You don't have a microphone. I'll hand you mine if you have remarks. Let me know. All right. With that, then we'll remind that we are beginning the recording. I assume the recording is on. Okay. Got an indication that it is. It's a regular scheduled meeting. I want to welcome, is Mayor Arulampalam with us? He's on his way. All right. Well, I was going to welcome him to his first MARB meeting. I haven't made his acquaintance yet, so I'm hoping to meet him later today. Then we'll move quickly into the public comment period. Public comment portion of the agenda, as noted on the agenda, will provide an opportunity for the public, members of the public, to speak. Before making your comments, please seek recognition from the chair. We'd like you to limit your comments to 2 minutes due to the time constraints. We have a lot of material to get through today. Speakers who have called in by phone, you can press *6 to unmute yourself. So with that, I'll recognize any members of the public wishing to make a comment to the MARB at this time. Yes, sir. Come on up. There's your microphone right here. Okay.
Morning.
Good morning. Are you Mr. Chester?
I am.
All right.
Morning, members of the board. My name is Eric Chester. I have the honor and privilege of representing the West Haven Federation of Teachers, the West Haven Teachers Union. I come to speak in support of the teachers contract that was negotiated between the union and the West Haven Board of Education. A little bit of background as to how we came to the agreement, I think, is important. Pursuant to the Teachers Negotiation Act, which governs negotiations between unions and Board of Educations, we commenced negotiations June 24th, 23. After a number of negotiation sessions with the board, we reached a tentative agreement with the Board of Education on August 18th, 23. The union ratified that agreement a few days after. West Haven Board of Education ratified that agreement on the same day. That was September 5th. On September 25th, the West Haven City Council ratified the agreement. Very next day, September 26th, that agreement was sent to this board. September 26th, 2023. That was just about 5 months ago. 5 months ago, the agreement was sent to this board, and we're here today where this board will act on the agreement. As a representative of the union, I want to make clear that we're really taking our principal position here is that there is today already an enforceable contract between the West Haven Board of Education and the West Haven Federation of Teachers, and that's pursuant to the state statute. MARB statute is clear. It instructs us that this board sits in the place of the legislative body and acts just as the legislative body does under the Teacher Negotiation Act. And when you look at the Teacher Negotiation Act, it says quite clearly that the legislative body has 30 days to reject the award if it's going to reject it. This board is the legislative body. That didn't happen. It's now 140 days since the contract was sent to this board. Our position, the statute supports it clearly, that this board had 30 days, just like the Board of Education or the City Council would have had, to reject the contract. So that is our position. That being said, we are not looking to prevail on a procedural technicality. That is our position, and we filed proceedings to enforce that. Nevertheless, we'd like this board to ratify the contract today. And that's for really a number of reasons. And I think most of them you already know. Number one, we have a teacher shortage in Connecticut. We have empty classrooms throughout the state. Specifically, we have empty classrooms in West Haven. The reason there are empty classrooms in West Haven is because we're losing teachers to neighboring districts that have more competitive salaries. In the materials that you have in support of the contract, you'll see what we refer to as comps or comparables. You'll see that West Haven is at the bottom, either at the bottom or very near to the bottom of every comparable school district that surrounds them, as well as comparable school districts with similar abilities to pay. The State Board of Education, they categorize Board of Educations based on their financial ability to pay. West Haven is in a specific group, coupled with, again, municipalities that have similar financial wherewithals to pay their teachers. And within that group, West Haven is at or near the bottom. So we're losing our teachers again to not just West Haven, they're going to Milford, they're going to Hamden, they're going to Orange and other districts because those districts pay more. This contract begins to close the gap between the salaries that the West Haven teachers are paid and their comparables are paid. West Haven obviously is a tier 4 municipality, and we're looking to, the teachers and everybody in the community is looking to improve West Haven's finances and improve the community. One way you improve a community is you make investments in that community. This contract makes an investment in West Haven's kids. And it does that through offering competitive salaries to the teachers who are going to teach those kids. These teachers are some of the best teachers you'll ever meet. It really is an honor and a privilege, and it's humbling to represent them. They're some of the best we have, and they should be compensated accordingly. That's all I have.
Thank you. We have someone named Kristen Malloy Scanlon signed up to. There she is.
Morning, Secretary and members of the MARB. My name is Krista Malloy Scanlon, President of the West Haven Federation of Teachers and School Nurses, Local 1547. I'm here today to bring to your attention our contract and the need for teacher retention. Our contract highlights a good faith negotiation between the Board of Ed and the Federation. Any good negotiation is a process of give and take. And this contract encompasses that. Both sides made gains and experienced some losses. For example, we lost some language on sabbatical leave, department heads, and school counselors. We also have an insurance premium increase. We are working 2 additional days for professional learning and for collaboration purposes. However, the salary increases are desperately needed in West Haven, which also includes increasing coaching salaries that have not been increased in over 25 years. My members contact me daily and inquire about the status of our contract because they cannot afford to teach in West Haven anymore. In fact, teachers receive emails weekly from other districts regarding their vacancies to entice our teachers to apply and to come to their districts. Quite frankly, it is working because 9 teachers and counting have left since January 1st. And we have lost close to 100 educators since 2020. Furthermore, if we look solely at the 2023-2024 school year, West Haven has lost 36 teachers to other districts, such as Fairfield, Naugatuck, East Haven, North Haven, and East Hartford, just to name a few. We're losing talented educators at a rapid rate because we're not marketable compared to neighboring communities who, in fact, are on the receiving end of our teachers who have received the best training, are provided with various resources, and who are valuable assets to our field. This is a huge loss. No matter how you look at it, we have lost and continue to lose teachers. And this contract is not the ultimate fix, but it is a good start. It finally makes West Haven comparable to other districts as it stands right now. And we are hopeful that this will assist in retaining and attracting educators, both new to the field and those with proven talent and experience. Federation is asking for your support and approval of this collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. We have Allison McBride signed up.
Hello, my name is Allison McBride, and I'm the Vice President of Finance for the West Haven Federation of Teachers, Local 1547. I would like to speak in reference to the provided salary comparisons according to Durg H, New Haven County, as well as Anglic scores. The West Haven salary scale consists of 10 steps based on 3 levels: bachelor's, master's, and 6th year. West Haven is in last place for salaries for all levels of education within Durg H. When you compare West Haven to New Haven County, we are also last on the list for salaries. This does not make us competitive at any level for attracting and retaining staff, newly certified or experienced. On the grand list of Anglic scores, West Haven is ranked number 159. at the bottom of the list. This ranking is well below communities with similar or less ability to pay, again, making us non-competitive within the field of Connecticut educators. In order for West Haven to attract newly certified teachers and maintain them, our starting salary scale must be competitive. This is also true for experienced teachers who reach the top step and see minimal raises of 1% or less every year. Our ratified contract allows us to accomplish these goals. The entry-level step places West Haven at a similar monetary level as others not only within Durg H, but within New Haven County and in comparison to communities with a similar ability to pay. The top steps in this new contract reflect competitive salaries for our experienced teachers, improving our ability to retain them from fleeing to surrounding areas where they have previously left to earn more than $10,000 above our current top step. The emails continue to arrive in our inboxes, attempting to lure us away on a daily basis. People are deciding that a little longer commute is worth more financial stability for their families than the loyalty of staying within district. West Haven teachers, as the largest bargaining unit in the city, have made compromises for years when it comes to contract negotiations. It is now time for the teachers to receive a contract that reflects current salaries within our field of expertise and our dedication to the students of West Haven.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to be heard during our public comment period? Anyone in the room? Anyone online? We see anybody? Simon. Hey, Simon. I see. All right. Other members of the public online or in the room? Doesn't look like anyone signaling they want to speak, so we'll conclude the public comment period. Thank you very much. I see the mayor has joined us, Mayor of Hartford. We will move to the next item on our agenda then, which is the approval of the minutes of the December 7, 2023 regular meeting. Draft minutes were distributed with your meeting materials. Any questions or comments about the minutes? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Ms. Hammersley. Have a second? Seconded by Mr. Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
It's Mark Waxenberg online. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion. Mr. Alvarez is going to abstain. He was not present. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda. City of Hartford. We have a subcommittee update. The Hartford subcommittee met on January 18 and staff will provide us an update.
Morning.
Morning.
We had a subcommittee meeting on January the 18th, and at which time a presentation for the fiscal year 23 audit reports was provided by Clifton Larson and Allen, and they presented that to the subcommittee. The audit firm issued a unmodified opinion for the city's financial statements and regarding also their internal controls and compliance. The state single audit report was also issued with an unmodified, and there were no findings within the report. The other item on the agenda that we discussed was other related business for the Board of Ed and communication about the budget and where they're going to land. I'm not going to comment on that because it probably will be discussed again later on. Thank you. Our next subcommittee meeting is scheduled for March the 21st.
Any questions from the board to the staff about the subcommittee update? If not, we'll move on to a review and discussion. The city and the board are here to discuss their monthly financial report for December of 23. I think this is our first meeting with the city as a tier 2 municipality, having recently made progress to get to a better place. All very good. And we can recognize Mr. Mayor. Do you want to start? Mayor Arulampalam, we haven't met yet. I'm Jeffrey Beckham, Secretary of OPM. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Secretary. Secretary and members of the board, I appreciate this opportunity to appear before you, not only for the first time as a tier 2 city, but for my first time as mayor of the city of Hartford. As you've seen, in this period 6, we're projecting surpluses of 6.55 million, which is up from 6.33 million in the last period. Virtually all of our favorability in revenues is tied to our state aid. The city's received 4.5 million more in municipal revenue share than was budgeted and 3.4 million more in pilot than was budgeted. The change in the prior month is in projected revenue is largely related to permitting fees, which are 420,000 more than we had budgeted. The most significant change in our expenditures is our overall projected unfavorability variance is about 2.6 million. The most significant change in expenditures in this period is a result of a large tax refund of $1.2 million, which has caused overage in other non-personnel categories to rise by $831,000. The change is largely offset by improvement in projected overage in the payroll category. Overall, our revenues are at 55.9% of our budget, which is compares to 54.7% for the same period in the prior year. Investment income has been strong in the first 4 months, but we're not currently projecting that it will exceed the budgeted amount. Our expenditures, when encumbrances are included, are at 42.7% of our budget, which is compared to 41.4% for the same period in the last year. Currently, our payroll, we're projecting an unfavorability by negative $694,000, which reflects overtime expenditures largely offset by our vacancy savings. Our vacancy savings are factored into the projections as they're realized month to month. So this unfavorability should diminish over the course of the year. We are in this period not projecting any change in our benefits and our legal fees, which we've projected an unfavorable variance in the other categories, largely due to our legal settlements and outside attorney costs. We've had over the first 6 months several large settlements, and the December report includes that large settlement, the tax refund paid in December. And in our utilities, we modest improvement in projected utility costs since the prior month due to water expenses. Happy to take any questions.
Very good. Questions of the board for the city regarding their December financials?
Good to see you.
Other questions? Is the board here? Board of Ed side for, come on up and tell us where things are from the board's perspective. Morning.
So, and just relatively speaking on track for December. We are monitoring uncertified severance and legal judgments have held steady at about 91%. Our fringe benefits are tracking some. That is a function of our capturing as much. We are also most concerning. Lastly, we have accrued about grant, which we were very excited about, but there was a little. So on balance, when we covering, we're did in the last 2 weeks. And we're planning. First two grants are really unchanged. Last couple times I've obviously those funding that noted this in the memo. The other thing I wanted to mention, you may have heard of some. Really, that's a difference between 60 million figure, the amount. Salary and fringe. Salary over the full year. Salary and fringe will be. Salary and fringe will.
So, quite a bit of the ESSER being expended for current operations then. Does create a structural problem for the future, right? You're gonna use 9 million of the ESSER 3 remaining unallocated to cover the current projected deficit, you say, for 24. That leaves about 26 to be expended before the deadline later this summer. Is that the 26th unobligated ESSER 3 gonna be spent?
Because of the contracts. After we use up to 9.
What was the 34 then? You said you had 34? I was taking the 9 off the 34.
And get you some, don't encumber salary. So the salary and fringe.
Okay. It sounds like you have a real challenge going forward though with the expiring federal funds.
reality that they allowed us to soften the blow of some of this.
I agree, both at the state level as well. Okay. Any other questions of the board? Mr. White?
Affect the city on our part of that, and I don't know if
Thank you. Other questions of the board for the city or the Board of Ed on their December financials? Well, it's good to see both of you. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure, about many and sundry items. With that, we'll move on to the town of Sprague. We have on the agenda review and discussion of a labor contract, just a discussion, no action. As a tier 2 municipality, the MARB doesn't have to take action on Sprague's labor contracts. There is a professional agreement signed by the Sprague Board of Ed and the Sprague Teachers League. New agreement covers the period July 1, 24 to June 30, 27. Wage increases are 3.79 for FY25, 3.92 for FY26, and 4.29 for FY27. The bargaining unit represents 25 and a half full-time equivalents. Meeting package today includes a copy of the fiscal impact and steps analysis, a market comparison analysis of teachers' settlements, redline summary of the contractual language changes, and the agreement itself. And the town is here to provide an overview of the labor contract. Good morning.
The superintendent is online.
I am online. Be glad to give you a quick rundown of that.
Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
We did our negotiation as interest-based bargaining, which is different than traditional. It's more of a discussion of things. The chair gave a accurate what our wages increase were. We were happy that this was under the state average, and also that the teachers were happy with what they received. Very quickly, I'll just review some of the other changes. During the first 2 years of the contract, this a step is dropped. Teachers go through a step process during their course. And because of Sprague's financial troubles, there have been many freezes on those steps, and we were having a hard time competing with surrounding towns. We lost about a third of our teachers to surrounding towns last year. Other changes that we had is that we codified the use of sick leave during a FEMLA leave. We also changed how we pay teachers. There were a number of different ways. Now, all teachers will be paid, the salary of a teacher is divided by 22, and they receive throughout the year 122 of their salary. We also changed how we calculated the credits for 6 year. The old contract said you have to get a degree or a 6-year certificate. In the new contract, it's how many credits that you could accumulate. This would help our speech pathologists and OT, PT people. Our stipends, who had not had an increase, had a 3% increase for our teachers. We also did an incentive not to use sick days. We changed if a teacher had to cover a class, we upped the amount of money that they would get paid per class. And we also looked at how we calculate minutes in prep time.
All right. Questions from the MARB for the Town Board of Ed regarding the teacher's contract? All right. Thank you for the presentation. Next item on our agenda then is a presentation regarding the FY23 audit reports. Town of Sprague did complete and submit to OPM its June 30th, 23 financial audit. First Selectman Blanchard is here with any comments to that. I'm told Sean O'Grady from King and Associates will be presenting the financial audit. Is he on Teams?
Yes, I'm here.
There he is. All right, take it away.
Is it possible to share a screen through here?
I hope so.
Okay, everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, I put together a couple slides. I know there's a lot of people here today, and you got a lot to cover, so I'll try not to take up too much of anyone's time. So the slides, they index back to the page numbers if you have a copy of the audit report and you want it to go to those page numbers. So first page, the town received an unmodified clean opinion. Going to page 14. Down here in the general fund. General fund's total fund balance at the end of June 30, 2023 was $1,187,760. The components of fund balance can be seen later in the report on page 36. GFOA recommends 2 months of annual revenues be kept in surplus, which is about 16.67%. At June 30, 2023, Sprague's general fund total fund balance was 11.9% of their annual budgeted revenue. The unassigned fund balance portion of that was $823,000, which is about 8.3% of their annual budgeted revenues. And the restricted fund balance of $349,724, that represents the amount that they would be required to pay back to MARB in fiscal year 24 under the formula in their loan agreement. So on page 14, the capital non-recurring fund, you can see it has unearned revenue of about 1.3 million. It's mainly due to a streetlight grant that they received that they haven't spent yet. Also on page 14, capital non-recurring fund, it has a positive total fund balance of 569,000. Negative unassigned portion of that is now only 30,000. 14 again. The ARPA grant fund, the unearned revenue was previously held in the general fund. This year we split it so that it could be seen in its own column, and it has 769,676 remaining as of June 30, 2023. Going to page 16. So I was working on the current year increase in the fund balance in the general fund was 692,000, and that's after interfund transfers. It looks like in the very good. So I put
Mr.
together.
O'Grady, if you can just suspend for a second. If you're online, please mute your microphone so we don't get any feedback if you're not speaking, please. Go ahead, Mr. O'Grady.
Okay. So I have a 4-year general fund balance chart here. So you can see that back in 2020, Sprague's fund balance was down in the negatives. 21 and 22, it increased. It's in 22, it was still below the 5%. Otherwise, the repayment would have been triggered. And in 2023, you can see that it's increased greatly. Same idea for the capital non-recurring fund. Back in 2020, this chart is mostly below zero. 2021, the negative portion got a little bit smaller. 2022, they were positive with just a little bit negative, and now in 2023, most of the chart is positive. On page 35, we have details about the loan agreement that they have with the MARB. Here. So reaching a fund balance of greater than 5% in the general fund would trigger the payback of the loan based on the current year's excess of revenues over expenditures. In fiscal year 2023, the town reached the fund balance greater than 10% of expenditures, and so they are required to pay back 40% of the current year's general fund surplus before transfers, which works out to be the $349,724. Going to page 47, so they have a sub event. After year end, the town sold the property that they had held in the capital non-recurring fund and received net proceeds of $174,000, which was deposited into CNR. On pages 48 and 50, the detailed budgetary schedule. Expenditures for general government came in $236,000 less than anticipated. And the expenditures for the Board of Education also came in $127,000 less than anticipated. Going to the federal and the state single audits, on the schedule of findings and question costs. The federal single audit major programs tested this year were Child Nutrition Cluster and the Education Stabilization Fund, the ESSER grant. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified in internal control over financial reporting, and no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified in internal control over the major federal programs. For the state single audit, the major programs tested private school pupil, municipal purposes and projects, and the tiered pilot grants. Again, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting, and no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control over the major state programs. In the state single audit on page 10, there is a summary schedule of prior year audit findings related to the open space grant last year. The town just didn't put up the required sign for the open space before the audit, but they did put it up after we mentioned it to them. So that finding has been corrected. That would be it. If there's any questions.
Questions from the board to the auditors or the town about the audit report? Well, your bar graphs are moving in the right direction. Like to be above the line consistently.
Yep.
Nice work. Okay. Then with the board's indulgence, I think it makes sense to go slightly out of order. I think item D we should do now, the monthly financials for the town, and then we can get to item C. So if we want to go ahead with the monthly financial report for December, the town and the Board of Ed can update us on that.
For our revenues, we're at 54%, which is pretty much on a par, just slightly below where we were last year at the same time. And our expenditures also are almost exactly where they were last year. Our revenue is a little bit higher, and that's because we have some higher interest income, mostly due to grant funds that for the street light that are earning us some interest while we're waiting to pay the bills. Year over year, we're pretty much right on. The tax collections are just a couple of percent lower, 64% versus 67% at the same time last year, and that was just due to a wire that came in January instead of normally it comes in December. So that funding had not come in yet at year. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the town of Sprague from the board concerning their December financials? Seeing none, then we can move back to item C, a review, discussion, and possible action on the first selectman's letter to us. We received a letter requesting release from MARB oversight. As background, the town of Sprague requested Tier 2 designation under the MARB in November of 2018. It's been a while. The town OPM entered into an MOU to designate Sprague as a Tier 2 municipality in 2019. The town was awarded $500,000 municipal restructuring funds to address its general fund balance deficit at the time. Town is also requesting a waiver for the repayment of that $500,000 from the municipal restructuring funds. OPM has prepared documentation listing the conditions that Sprague needs to meet in order to be released as a Tier 2 municipality. And in our judgment, it has met all 4 conditions. Do we have any other elaboration we're going to make on that, or just that those materials have been provided to the board? And does the board have any questions of the staff concerning that judgment? All right, then. I'll entertain a motion from the board to recognize that Sprague has met those conditions and to release the town as a Tier 2 municipality. Moved by Mr. Alvarez of the Treasurer's Office. Oh, we have a question. I'm going to ask your advice about that after we take this vote. I believe that's in my discretion, but I'll take your temperature on it. Okay, so motion made by Mr. Alvarez, seconded by Mr. Falsigno. Any further discussion? All those in favor? I'm sorry? The 500,000? No. So any other clarification on the motion? Seeing none, we'll take the ayes and nays. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We'll see you again sometime soon. While we're outside this context, perhaps at the legislature. So with that, though, as you know, consistent with that action, there is the matter of the $500,000 in restructuring funds. They have requested a waiver of the repayment. I'm advised that is within my discretion, but I would like to hear from the board as to your opinion. Does anyone have any? Mr. White.
I was impressed with that. I'm there. Hopefully you.
We'll put it into our general fund and that will.
Mr. Biller. I'll need advice on that.
It stated that it was progressive, so it would be like 20%. So this year, if they do not receive a waiver in their financials, as the auditor just mentioned, they would be required to pay us back $340,000. If you look at the overall right now, their entire general fund balance is at $1.1 million, which you heard was only at 11%. If they have to, in 2 years, pay back $500,000, that's going to drop them back to $657,000. It just took them 4 years to get here for the $500,000. It will have a financial impact on them. And it was also noted in their Moody's report that one of the reasons for their upgrade which happened while they were in, under our oversight, was due to building their fund balance and having a liquidity. So this will impact that.
Mr. Alvarez.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I would very strongly urge us, or urge you in your discretion, to forgive that. I think the entire purpose of the MARB and the process is to make sure that municipalities that have voluntarily chosen to participate in this process, that have tried and succeeded in writing their finances, should be successful. And it is our goal that they are successful. And I think the work that they have done shows how serious they are about this. The first time I actually met the first select woman a couple of months ago, and we ended up talking about the MARB and how Sprague was in a position where it had dramatically improved its finances. And she said that she actually loved the collaboration with the state and all of the financial advice and all of the work that was done to improve the town's finances. And I think us sort of levying this on them to repay, I think would put them back in a position that I don't think we want them to be in. And I think they have done so much work to be successful that I would urge that $500,000 be forgiven.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Mr. Hamilton.
Question, is there a position from OPM on this, or you're really just looking for guidance from this board or suggestions from this board?
The latter.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree that I think it does set them back to hold them to this repayment. I think they've done everything that we've asked them to do, and I think they've done a good job of it. So I could support recommending the waiver to you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first time? Mr. Falsignan.
I congratulate you. It's been a pleasure watching your progress. I think it's a testament to your perseverance. But I do believe that the 500,000 was a loan. And I do believe that obligations are obligations. Not a politician, I'm a businessman. Obligations are obligations. You have an obligation to pay back a loan, and that's what it was. And I respect Mr. Alvarez's position, but I would be in favor of not reducing your fund balance as extremely as it would, but maybe working out a more favorable repayment plan. But I do believe obligations are obligations, and I think it's a bad precedent to set for the MARB to give that to forgive the obligation.
Thank you, Mr. Falsigno. Anyone else? Sammersley?
I would like to align my comments with Mr. Alvarez. I think that allowing the town of Sprague to maintain those resources and to maintain their fund balance puts them on a stronger footing into the future. And given that it's a relatively small waiver, I would submit that you go ahead and waive the $500,000.
Mr. White? Agreed. Other advice? All right. We'll take that into consideration. Yes, Mr. Biller. Okay. All right, I appreciate the board's comments. We'll be in touch one way or another. So that concludes our business, it sounds like, except for that last item. And we'll talk to you soon.
Good job.
If I may, I would like to,
ma'am.
I would like to thank the MARB for the guidance and the support. As Mr. Alvarez stated, it has been very valuable, and I think it has helped the town grow. Without that support, I think a much larger struggle for the town. So we do appreciate that very much. Really was a lot of help, and things that maybe we wouldn't have thought to try or thought to do. Um, Whatever you decide about the money, I can see it both ways myself. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, we will move right along. Morning is getting away from us. The city of West Haven is up next. We're going to start with the subcommittee report. West Haven Subcommittee met on February 6, 2024. OPM staff will provide an update.
Really, my update is going to be covered throughout the materials today. There was only a couple of items here that really are not worth mentioning. The ones that we need to cover will be discussed today.
Very well. If there are no other questions from the board about that, we'll move on to next item on our agenda, which is to review and discuss the Board of Ed proposed budget for next fiscal year 2025. School Superintendent Mr. Cavallero will be presenting. Is he with us or is he online? My screen has gone blank. I don't know what's happened here. Oh, that one's on. The school budget has been approved by the West Haven Board of Ed and sent to the mayor for the city to review. And we will hear from the Board of Ed about their budget for next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We've actually had a very collaborative process with our board in discussing our needs. We did a full presentation for the MARB subcommittee a couple weeks ago. I think we explained exactly all of our funding sources, where the money would come from, how we would pay for the teacher's raise, which yes, it is built into this budget. Really, what it comes down to, asked for, I believe, $1,900,000 over and above what we had received in the last fiscal year, in the current fiscal year. We are counting on about $3 million or $3.5 million in state funding for the Alliance District to fund a lot of our raises, and as you know, has to be targeted. Remainder of the money, the $1.9 million, is money that is currently being funded through ESSER funding. That amounts to about a 2.2% increase, which we think is really very reasonable considering what some other towns and boards of eds and municipalities are trying to work through now with the elimination of some of that funding. While we didn't like to do it, we started eliminating some of the jobs in anticipation of losing the funding over the last year or two. Breakdown of the budget of what the actual request is. I'll have a copy of the budget. Oh, I have it. Yep. We are currently funding $225,000. Again, this is all ESSER funding, and this amounts to why we asked for an increase from the city. $225,000 for outreach workers. Again, it's a very diverse group of individuals, bilingual people, people who we feel can relate to members of our community that can go out and discuss issues with them and hopefully get families working with us and getting them, in some cases, back to school. Reading and math specialists, again, as part of the ESSER funding, most of that, or a lot of that money had to go towards supplementing programs and in providing additional support after COVID. We've done that, and we'd like to keep those positions. Obviously, the needs just don't go away. The part-time cleaners, again, we're asking for it, but we brought them in when we first opened up schools in high touch point areas. Again, I believe a lot of districts did that. They come in handy. They'll work, during the day. Part of our night crew, we use them as substitutes. so it's worth it. Since COVID started, we've always had security guards in our middle school and high school. We've brought them down to the elementary schools, and they've been a valuable asset. I don't see how we can take them away right now. People feel good about having a security guard in the building. And the last item is certified staff covering lunch and recesses. In our contract currently, and you approve the next contract, our elementary school teachers have always had what we call a duty-free lunch period, something that I've always tried to get the actual classroom teachers to cover the lunch waves. What we did was we worked out an agreement where we paid them additional money by giving up their free period. It's very valuable. It keeps the kids safe, structured activities. And, again, that is basically the additional funds we're asking for. Did bring along Matt Cavallaro, who's our business manager, and there were a lot of questions at the last subcommittee meeting regarding special education and our EL programs. And I brought the two people responsible for overseeing those programs, Dr. Stefania Lowry, who oversees our special ed, and Rafaela Frank, who oversees our EL program. I think those were kind of eye-opener discussions with the members of the subcommittee, because there were a lot of things they weren't aware of, but they're here to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to hear from them. Your special ed needs, the trends, what's going on with special ed and EL. This is me doing homework for the next governor's budget.
Hi, Stefania Larry. I'm the Director of Pupil Services for West Haven. Over the past 3 years, our overall outplacement numbers have lessened. We used to trend around 140 students in district that were outplaced. Last year, we ended at 118 students that required a more therapeutic setting. We've had some move-ins this year that were already outplaced. So our number has gone up from 118. But we're always looking for creative ways to support our students in district. One being we've teamed up with our local RESC ACEs to provide an outplacement within our public school setting. So we have 2 classrooms with 16 slots where students that required that intensive support can be placed in that program within district, which tuition-wise is less than half, and transportation, it saves a great deal amount of money. I'm a big believer, and I've said this at the last meeting, and I'll continue to say it, in students attending their neighborhood schools. So we are always looking for ways to keep our students in district. I think it's a big value for the community and our families that we serve. I think the previous town had mentioned, and it's the same, I'm sure, across the state, tuition costs have increased significantly. So even though our number has lessened since previous years because of tuition increasing substantially across the state, that has been a big challenge for us, and transportation costs as well, as you all know. I don't have to go over that, but cost of maintaining the vehicles and gas and whatnot. In addition to that program that I spoke about in district with ACEs, we have partnered with ACEs also for our transportation needs. We do shared rides with neighboring towns. So if we have students that are attending, let's say, Milestones in Orange, on that run, there may be West Haven students, Milford students, Orange students to cut down on costs, because solo rides can cost upwards of $350 a day. So we're always looking for creative ways to cut down on our transportation costs as well.
How long have you been doing this, you personally?
So I've been in this position for 3 years, but I was the assistant. This is my 11th year or 12th year.
Is the census of special ed enrollees up or down? You mentioned it had gone down from a projection, but over time,
So our outplacement numbers luckily
outplacement.
have decreased, but our overall number of students with disabilities in district has increased significantly over the decade.
Yep.
Last year at this time, we were at 1,200, and currently we're at 1,313, and we're only halfway through the year. So I anticipate more referrals, obviously, within district and, students moving in.
Questions about special ed in West Haven? How about, oh, yes, Ms. Hammersley.
Up with ACES, is that relatively new? And is there the option to expand collaboration with the rest?
Sure. So it is new. This is our third year that we've had this program over at McCurl School. It's one of our elementary schools, a K-4 school. And right now we are looking at, we seem to notice that a lot of our students in district have the most difficulty transitioning from our 5-6 school to middle school. Naturally, there's a lot of different transitions around that grade level. So we're meeting with ACES to possibly expand it for that particular age group. Many of our students require a therapeutic setting for behavior-based reasons. Academically, we're always able to support our students and meet the needs of our students in district, but it's more so for behavior reasons. So fortunately, with Mr. Cavallaro's support, we've had additional staff members in the building to support students behaviorally. We've expanded our BCBA support, board certified behavior analysts, our behavior technicians. We've increased the number of school social workers in district, our counselors, and our outreach team, as Mr. Cavallaro referenced previously. So we're always trying to meet our students' behavioral or mental health needs in district. Yes, and prior to me starting in this position, more than a decade, I think, we've always had an ACES collaboration at the high school level for students that are within those transition years that they stay with us until 22.
Mr. White.
As far as the overall budget, I think the main increase for the overall special education budget is the increase in tuition and transportation.
London, I think we mentioned last meeting. It's quite expensive.
Yes.
Many times you take a lot of time, placing a child out. You go through the process, you try to do the least, place a student out, get the family to agree to it. They're very content with the new program. It's very, very difficult to try to say, you know what, we just created a new program. Come back and try this, when the child's having some success. You could do it. You absolutely can do it.
So you're correct that it is a PPT decision and it's composed of the family and school officials. But also, I really strongly believe that families do want to stay close to home. We have kindergartners that travel to Cromwell. You know, I wouldn't want my 5-year-old on the bus for that long. So if we can offer a program in-house, they're definitely more agreeable to that decision.
Other questions about special ed? English language learner, I think, is what ELL stands for, right? Something like
It's
that.
actually multilingual learners now, or EL, English learners. The terminology keeps changing. I'm Rafaela Frank. I've been in this position since 2007. And when I first took over the EL department as a side of my science K-12 position, it was maybe over 300 EL students in the district. Today, we are at 1368 total population, which represents 22% of our total student population. When we spoke at the subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, we were at 1348. So just within 2 weeks, we have registered 20 more students. And I think I was in the superintendent's office on Friday. We have 14 new refugees that arrived in district within the last week. We have 43 different languages. Our highest number one language is Spanish. Arabic and Pashto are number 2 and 3. We have a lot of refugees, over 200. Most of our refugees, and I think we discussed this in the subcommittees last time, are SLIFE students, which are students with limited interrupted formal education. Most of them are from Afghanistan. Now, besides SLIFE, most of them have not been in school prior to arriving in the United States. So it's been extremely difficult for our teachers, for our staff, to work with these students and to make sure we address all their needs. I'm the product of ELL myself. I do understand how it feels sitting on the other side of the desk, and it's not only the academic piece, it's also the social emotional piece that we need to address. We look at our schools today in district. None of our elementary schools have less than 25% total student population that it's English learners or MLs. Our highest is at 43% English learners, and following that is 37%. High school is closer to 300 students, and since the beginning of this school year, we have registered 426 English learners in our district out of the 1,100 new registrations since the beginning of the year. Talked about the languages, so that's questions.
Questions from the board about English language learners in West Haven? Sir.
I can just say, again, a lot may be made of what our population looks like, and we do see a slight trend going down. But I think as you can hear from Rafaela and Stefania, the needs are certain. Make budgetary decisions based on that, but it's the facts of life.
It's good to know, what the priorities might be. So appreciate your information. Other questions about the Board of Ed presentation today? And you're with the city now, and the city will bring us their budget in the next month or so, I guess. So we'll see what that looks like. Mr. Hamilton?
Issue we talked about at the subcommittee, it was, I think, referred to in your budget presentation as the 2%. You had shown the sources of funding for next year's budget, and I just wanted to confirm that there is a new revenue item that you've built into this budget for next year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is, but I can let Matt explain it. I believe we've worked out the issue with the city.
Yeah, I want to make sure the other members of the board are aware of that, and obviously as well that the city is aware of it.
So myself and the mayor and David Taylor met yesterday. We discussed all areas of the budget. When you brought the issue up at the subcommittee, we looked into it a little further. We're no longer going to pursue those fundings. The funding itself was targeted for additional programmatical areas after school in terms of enrichment and whatnot. So it would be new expenses. So it's not going to cause a budget hole because there have to be new programs that we would create. By the city fully funding the $2 million request, we feel that we will be able to still have all the enrichment activities that we currently have. So we don't feel that funding is necessary because it would be at a detriment to the cities.
So just to confirm, you are removing that
Yes,
from your budget?
I will rework the all funds spreadsheet, having that removed for your deliberations over the city budget as a whole.
Okay, great. Well, that was the 2%. So I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so that pretty much resolves the issue then. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Alvarez.
I really appreciate that. It's teamwork. We have very, very dedicated teachers, administrators, central office staff. And I just want to, I know we talked about the contract, you guys are going to be deliberating about the contract, but we spend a lot of time training our new teachers on instructional strategies on how to work with special education or special population and regular ed students, and training them and going to other districts because they can't afford the cost of living. It's really not frustrating, but stressful because we want to make sure that we provide our children with the best education. And we're all working very, very hard. So please look at our contract.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for that.
Other questions about the budget?
Secretary.
Yeah. Ms. Kennison.
Thank you. I think that it would be important for us to bring to the board's attention that the 5-year plan covered an increase of $1.5 million and that this Board of Ed's request was $2 million. And I think that it would be important for us to understand that gap and how they came to a conclusion because they were not aligned at the subcommittee.
We explained that at the beginning of the presentation. The 1.9 again represents what we're losing in the ESSER funding.
Yep.
We understood the 1.5 was part of the 5-year plan, but again, it doesn't hurt to ask. Our intent was, or our hope was, we wouldn't have to lose any services.
I appreciate you picking up the ESSER in your budget and not asking the state for it. So do you have any other structural issues with the ESSER expiring? I mean, you're picking this 1.9 up, but you're good otherwise?
Our biggest concern, by the way, is just filling the job so we can keep the support.
Sure. That's in contrast to one of our prior municipalities, as you heard our colloquy. So, okay. Any other questions about the Board of Ed's budget that the city is considering, and we'll see what they do. We'll move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is review, discussion, and possible action on a labor contract, the Board of Ed and the West Haven Federation of Teachers Local 1547. Superintendent Caballero is still with us here. I understand he may be accompanied by other staff to provide an overview of the labor contract. The term of the agreement is for September 1st of this year to August 31st of 27. It was approved by the Board of Ed in September, as it's been noted, and the City Council approved it in September as well. Your meeting package includes a copy of the settlement agreement, the red line agreement, the financial impact of the settlement, There's information regarding funding for the increase, as well as a comparison of salaries to other municipalities, and the contract itself is provided. So.
I could read the settled agreement. Out of contract. Are giving our teachers. Struggle going into this negotiation. Question was, how I would say lowest of the low in now to make more money in the AAU program. Moving them only to the middle, not going up. Back there. Us, and I hope it's going to more of this happening with our employees, $2,000 to waive them. Rather than current employees, house or a child that works for Board of Ed. But I'm getting the benefits too. Not going to be able to. Other good thing, and I know session. Allow us to do is fair trade-off for the corporate. Much of guidance counselors used to hourly rate, so
Good morning. The only things that I would add is, we came into this knowing we had to do something with the salaries, and we've made a pretty good dent. But in hindsight, when you look at teacher salary increases this year, which averaged, when you factor in the cost of step movement, about 4.5% the first year and 4% the other years, as much as we worked and think we made some progress, we barely moved the needle. But I think it's an important step forward and a good contract, and I certainly encourage its approval.
Thank you. Mayor Borer, did you want to say a few words?
Right, I could speak to the budget overall, right?
Okay.
Because this is incorporated within the budget. I think the Board of Education has done a great job of towing the line, not only through the MARB years, but the years prior. Our teachers haven't seen an increase in many years. They are the bottom not only of their DIRG, but in our New Haven region, but statewide for municipality our side. I think our Board of Education did a great job during COVID years. We were one of the few municipalities that opened up. Our teachers always rise to the occasion. And in our, as Ms. Kennison mentioned, in our 5-year plan, there was a 1.5 increase that was already built in that you had already approved. This is an additional funding, but not much, I think, for the amount of work that they do. And, you know, their budgets have been balanced consistently. So I want to applaud them, and I'm supportive of this.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions of the board for the Board of Ed? Mr. Hamilton.
Just want to get clarification on a couple of issues. One, on the 2 additional teaching days, is that incorporated in the overall salary, or do they get, do the teachers receive any kind of, additional per diem payment or anything for those? So there's no additional cost. Okay, well, I think that's important because that actually equates to about a full percentage if you're just looking at it in terms of per diem basis. So it brings your 4%, you could say, in a way down to 3% almost. So I think that's helpful. Question on the numbers in terms of you've got one schedule, and I think I know the answer, but you've got one that shows that the dollar amount of the increase is $2,379,000, which equates to a percentage increase of 5.46%. But then elsewhere, I believe it's actually a 4% bump in the top step. Or can you describe exactly what the increase is? And then I want to talk a little bit about why your number isn't coming up to 5.46%.
I defer to Matt on the numbers, but just in terms of how the increases work, the folks at the top step get a 4% increase. The folks who are on step will only get the cost associated with step movement. So for example, the first year, advanced people who are on step, it's a 3.13% increase. And then for, some small percentage of the group, let's say 40% are getting the 4% increase. It's obviously not a full 4% increase to the budget.
Right, okay. And so the 5.46 is that impact of the 3.46 plus the 4% for the folks who are going to get the, who are at top step, who will go to an 11th step. Is that correct? Okay. And, but I think the 5.46 actually, in a way, overstates the actual cost to the school district in the sense that your calculation most likely is assuming steady state, no turnover in staff. So to the extent somebody retires or somebody leaves and the replacement comes in lower on the scale, then that would result in a number lower than 5.46.
Tom, the only thing I would say to that is, and again, I mentioned this at the subcommittee meeting, it's so competitive out there. We are overpaying for bringing in new teachers. We'll lose a teacher, especially in a shortage area, a couple of weeks prior to the school year, and we'll get someone with only a couple of years of experience, but we're paying them at a higher step. So we don't reap the savings that we used to in the past. Well, there'll be some, but not what we used to see.
Right. Okay. And in terms of your, you had a schedule impact of the settlement. I'm sorry, no, the funding, you had a schedule funding the increase. And I'm going back to this issue. You've got in here 2% carryover, and I don't know whether that could be one of two things. It could be you could have carryover money from a prior year that you're allowed to carry over into a subsequent year, or this might be the 2% ECS set aside we talked about that you said you had taken out of your
Right. So
budget.
this was done in September when we originally submitted the that was when we were planning on moving forward with the 2%. But as you could see, with the ECS increases and the city increases, were well beyond what it takes first 2 years in 26-7. Without that carryover, we're a little under.
Okay, so basically the money is coming, you're not going to be carrying that you're not putting that 2% carryover in, but it's going to result in fewer funds available for anything else that you may need or want. Okay, great. Okay, I guess the only other thing I wanted to say was I think the material you provided to us did make a very compelling case that the teachers in West Haven are really at the low end of the scale, that your wages are not competitive. I don't place as much, I'm not as concerned about when you're comparing to some in your DERG like Stanford or Norwalk, because those are Fairfield County. It's a little different world down there. But, when you compare West Haven to New Haven and Hamden and Ansonia and Derby and so on, it's clear that your salaries are low, and certainly is having an impact on your ability to recruit and retain employees. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I see Mr. Waxenberg has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just to move it along, I'll move to approve the contract.
All right. Let's see if we have more questions first. Mr. White may have a question. Thank you. Other questions of the city, the Board of Ed concerning this contract? Any further discussion by members of the board on this contract? Mr. Waxenberg has moved approval of the contract. Is there, Mr. Biller seconds the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item is approved. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the FY22 audit reports. And thank you very much for all your hard work, by the way. We'll move on to the FY22 audit reports. MARB members should have received copies of the City of West Haven's audited financials for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. I hope Joseph Centofanti, partner from PKF O'Connor Davies, is available to There he is to provide an overview of the financial report. Please proceed, sir.
Financial highlights, modified opinion. Some other notable items, expenditures exceeding budget, recommend departments or recommending recommendations in here that, okay. Again, some talk about 20 over, so this is hopefully something.
Could you just make sure your microphone's on? It's a little bit difficult to.
Is it not on? It's on. All right, there you go. Sure. So that's on page 40. On page 41, extraordinary item, the casualty loss resulted from the embezzlement and prior period adjustment on page 89 due to the new lease standard. That's basically what was different as compared to last year. Looking at general fund, exhibits C and D, page 20 and 22, unassigned fund balance is almost at $8 million. 4.9% of expenditures, prior year was 3.7, so a decent increase. Net change in fund balance was 2.3 million. Extraordinary item, the casualty loss was 265,000. General fund revenues, revenues exceeded budgets by 2.5 million. That basically came from intergovernmental, the tiered pilot program, and some sale of capital assets offset by transfers in that weren't made of the $1.8 million. Expenditures were over budget by the 185,000. And that was made up, but general government was positive about 820. Public safety was over by 510. Public works was over by 530. And the casualty loss, of course, unbudgeted was 265. So moving on to some of the other major funds, Allentown Fire Department, revenues were 9.9, almost $10 million. Expenditures were 8.3. So the net increase in that position of the 1,661, there were expenditures being below budget by 364,000. So that fund we'll look at is you know, that since they did have an excess, I think it's something they can look at to increase the pension funding, because that we'll see that number is extremely low. Sewer fund, the revenues were $11.8 million, almost the same as the prior year. Net decrease in that position, 37,000. You know, last year they had a good year, 1.5 million, and 22 is basically break even. The balance of the COVID monies were fully spent as of June. Internal service funds on page 25, 27, and 117 to 119. Some contributions sitting there for OPEB that hopefully will be transferred once that trust and that account is set up. So the net decrease in that position was the $1 million. You know, the prior year they had a positive operation of almost 1.6. The medical fund is looking at current ratios just because some of it's short term, some of it's long term. Medical fund is well funded. General liability and workers' comp basically are almost at zero as far as the current ratio. I mean, you don't have any money to pay current claims other than what's budgeted. Additional monies there. Pension funds, of course, this is very historical now compared to where we are now, but pension was 74% funded. Actually went down unaudited a little bit to like about 71% for June 23. Again, we haven't done all the audit work, but that's what the actuary report, the GASB reports are saying that change in fair value of 21 million. Again, we're talking 22 back in 23. The Allentown pension is about 34% funded, and that did go up at 23. Again, subject to audit to 38%. That's a extremely low level of funding. So something to pay attention to future budgets and ability to put additional funds in there in the current year. For OPEB, there's no trust at June 22. I understand the trust was set up. I'm not sure if there's a bank account set up yet to be able to do that. There's 325,000 funded that's sitting in that medical trust fund. And again, the liability at June 22 is 125 million. For Allentown, again, no trust, not funded. And the liability is about 25 million. Federal and state single audit, unmodified opinion on compliance. We did have internal control findings that have been there for the last several years. Vendor approval, again, remembering this is June of 22, city payroll segregation, We did have some program findings related to procurement and the CRF grant cash disbursements that'll be going in 23 because the grant has been fully expended. ESSER grant, prevailing wages related to construction that was done. Programs we tested was the CRF fund, Title I, and the ESSER grant. There was a corrective action plan for these findings that was submitted with the audit. Single audit, again, unmodified opinion on compliance, total expenditures about $80 million. Internal control findings are the same as for federal. The programs that we tested, Alliance District, the tiered pilot, and flood control and beach erosion. Findings related to the daycare program, the monitoring process, communication grant, just a reporting issue, reports are not filed. The school readiness, again, same concept of a monitoring needs to be. And again, corrective action for those ones submitted. The last section is recommendation. This is just selected at the full recommendations that have been filed. So again, these conditions are as of June 30, 22. We will update those. And some are going to be the same for 23, probably based upon timing, but for 24, expect some of these to be removed. First two, again, are the vendor approval, material weakness, and the payroll segregation, which we consider a significant deficiency. And the green indicates something new as compared to if you look at 21 to 22. The green shading is just an additional recommendation that wasn't there in 21. Revenue is just that, and so we have a good accountability. They should be reported gross somewhere in the financials. Bank reconciliations, again, timely approval and formally a lot of it's documentation, monetary approvals, staffing levels have changed.
Minimal requirements.
Next page, the Clean Water Fund grant reimbursement request. It's just looking at state allows monthly requests, but it seems like the last couple of requested all the money when the project was complete instead of kind of requesting along the way. Just it's more of a best practice cash flow comment. Grant compliance, again, that's a certified payrolls. That was one of the findings. Construction and student activity cash receipts. Documentation needs to be a little bit more robust for that as far as what was deposited and what should have been. Did remove one recommendation, which was related to department and issue of debt, equipment financing notes. There was no new. It's the high level presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions concerning the FY22 audit for the city of West Haven? Mr. Hamilton.
A few points I want to highlight. One is the casualty loss of the 265,000. Can you refresh our memory, or maybe David can, my recollection is the total loss was a million something, or just under a million. And so the 265, if I remember correctly, I think the city had recognized a significant portion of the loss previously, but how did we get at a point where we had 265 that was recognized in this fiscal year?
Just that the embezzlement scheme cross fiscal years. They may have talked about it as one number historically, but the actual transactions cross fiscal
Gotcha.
years.
Okay.
So if you looked at last year, I don't have that with me, what that number was, plus the 265 would be the total that I could see.
Okay, makes
Clearly.
sense. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And just two other points I want to just sort of highlight. You mentioned both of them. One is the internal service fund and the status of the internal service fund, particularly the lack of assets available for all of those liabilities associated with runout claims on workers' compensation and general liability. And I know that the city has made some headway recently in terms of starting to fund that, but I just wanted to highlight magnitude of that loss, that if you could look at it and say that law, if you're trying to get a understanding of the overall financial position of the city, would you say it's fair to take your positive general fund balance and your negative internal service fund balance, if you're trying to understand, well, really, where is the city? Those two, in essence, sort of net each other in a way, don't they?
Conceptually, the variable is that workers' comp is a long-term liability. So at least looking at the current portion, that's kind of why I talk about the current ratio. So at least that portion I would definitely consider netting. But the workers' comp claims go on forever, and so not all of it's going to be due in 1 year, but
right. And what was the amount that's due in 1 year? Do you know that or have that?
separated. For workers' comp and then for general liability, it's 3.5 million.
Okay.
The other part is the medical is 525. That clears within 6 weeks.
Right.
Current portion of the long term is by about 3.5.
Okay, great. And the other thing I wanted to just highlight was the police pension fund. And obviously, it was not a good year in the markets last year, but the status of the police pension fund is it previously was a well-funded pension plan at 92%. It's now a moderately funded plan, I would say, at 73%. And so the investment loss for this fiscal year was $20,600,000. I guess you're not the actuary, but presume the actuary smooths gains and losses over a multi-year period. Typically 5 years is what actuaries use. But what that means is there are implications, and not positive implications, negative implications associated with a $20 million loss that's going to be, in essence, sort of recognized for actuarial funding purposes over a 5-year period, which means the city's contributions for pensions for the police pension fund are going to have to go up, and go up more than they thought they were going to before this audit report was available. And it sounds like we've taken a peek at the 23 numbers, and although you didn't go down significantly in 23, you really haven't made up any of those losses either in 23. So, it looks pretty clear that the pension implications are going to be, significant. And so I would certainly recommend that the city, if you haven't already asked your pension actuary for updated numbers, you need to be looking at those because the police pension fund lost a substantial amount of money. Again, not necessarily because of, not suggesting there was anything wrong with the way the pensions were being invested. It's really just a function of the market. But it does mean that the pension fund is not in a position to, take on lots of new liabilities either, in my opinion.
Other questions regarding the audit report for FY 22? All right, well, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
Next item on our agenda is the mayor's executive summary. This is a new addition to the MARB meeting agenda. Mayor Borer will be providing the members with an update on the changes and improvements being made to the operations of the city of West Haven.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. And thank you all for having us here today. I want to kick off with our positive news, which I'm sure you read, and I know I sent some information out, and that was our credit rating upgrade. So we've been upgraded to BBB plus. That was a significant improvement for this city. And I don't want to steal Bill's thunder. He'll be talking about that later, and he's online. But I think it's certainly worth kicking off our presentation with. And I want to take the opportunity to really thank, it was in a collective effort, not only by the MARB members, Whittlesley came on board to identify our gaps. Protiviti came on board to help us address those gaps, and the hard work of our internal team that really got us to this place. They not only gave us a credit upgrade, but they gave us a positive outlook based on a lot of the work that we've been doing and a lot of the work, the plans that we presented. And I also want to thank our treasurer, Ron, who's a big part of putting those presentations together and who's taken a different approach towards our treasury function, which they acknowledged and recognized. So that was great news. Just going to give you some update, and this is a little repetitive for our subcommittee, but worthy of noting. So one of the things that I've mentioned before was our open positions. We had about 30 open positions at the city, and these were critical positions. There was 5 positions in our finance departments, our personnel department, our grants department. Not that all positions aren't critical, but these are positions that as vacant is causing challenges for us. So getting our arms around what those positions are, updating those job descriptions, doing salary studies. As you've heard throughout today, our salaries are on the low end. That has been a challenge for recruiting for those positions, but we are continue to aggressively try to recruit. We did add a few positions, which payroll manager, which Whittlesley had recommended, which was critical. We don't have an oversight to our payroll. We added an economic development commissioner. We haven't had an economic development commissioner in over 10 years, which is a significant gap. We converted a position to a project manager to help move some of those economic development projects along, and then also upgraded our grants director position because, as you know, there's significant funding out there, funding that's getting ready to expire or dry up, if you will. And we really haven't tapped into a lot of those grants that are out there and that are available. So those are the positions that we've updated. And as I said, we've been hiring and we've been making some offers and have really been making a lot of effort to address the overtime. Because of those vacancies, we've had significant overtime throughout the administration. The other thing we're doing is our boards and commissions, and that may not seem like as significant as our internal positions, but that really is an extension of our government. And we have boards and commissions that are required by our charter and required by law that haven't been filled. So we have to make some time. It's been 2 months, we're getting there, to really fill those boards and commission positions. They help us in our government operation. Our employees at City Hall, I just want to recognize they've been really positive and open to all the changes that we're making. I feel a little bit of a different tone and a different, culture shift. One of the things we had was the state ethics agency come down and they did ethics training for all of our employees. They wanted to be a part of that. They want to demonstrate that we're looking to demonstrate that we want to make sure we're abiding by our ethics code. We have a new ethics commission that was developed last year that put together a disclosure form that everybody has now completed. We're also doing a lot of work around economic development, and that really means setting the stage for our investments. You don't turn the switch and all of a sudden you have the development. You have to change the way you do business. And West Haven had not a great reputation for how we do business in the city, particularly, for example, in our building department. So we had to restructure the whole building department to make it more user-friendly and streamlined. We also recommitted to SCROG. So SCROG is our council regional governments in the New Haven region. We haven't really been present in the past 6 years. So we are now present. Not only were we present, but I went on the board to be the treasurer and get on the transportation committee because that's where all the funding is. But there's significant funding that's available through the SCROG. So we are working with them to tap into that, particularly around our infrastructure in the city, our transportation and our environmental and flooding concerns. We also secured a grant from UConn who's helping us to map out our brownfields across the city, which will also help contribute towards our economic development. And we also developed a project manager will help move the funding we've already received from the state along. We have a whole blight fight program, and that contributes towards our economic development efforts because when you're trying to attract investors towards your city, the city needs a upgrade with respect to our facades and how we look. So we have a multi-pronged approach to cleaning up our existing businesses. We also, I had asked for a moratorium on some businesses, neon signs, things like that, that help create a better look in the areas where we're looking to invest. So some of the other things that we're doing, one of the MARB members mentioned in a previous meeting, what are you doing to identify the gaps? We shouldn't be, always telling you what you need to do and hiring folks to tell you what to do. What are you doing? So on a parallel track, while we work with the consultants, we are aggressively trying to determine we need to do business different. Some of those aspects are securing the funding from our grants that we haven't drawn down from the state. So we've already identified about $800,000 in LoCIP funds. Work we've done, we've paid for that, we're entitled to from the state. They were earmarked for West Haven. So that's a big chunk of funding that we have, we saw. We're also going through all of our contracts to see what has gone to bid in the past years, what hasn't gone to bid, what needs to go to bid. We're also approaching our cash differently. All of our departments accept a wide amount of cash. We have an ATM actually in the first floor of City Hall so that you could go get cash and pay everything in cash. So we're working to put debit systems in. And these are I'm just giving you examples of what we're trying to do on our own. And then of course, we're working on the budget. Joe gave the presentation on the fiscal year 2022. I want you to know that one of our number one priorities is to get fiscal year 2023 audit done on time. We are a few years behind. We caught up in November with fiscal year 2022. Our goal is June to have 2023 done so we could have 2024 done in December, and then we will be all caught up in our audits. That is one of our number one priorities. And then, of course, we're working on the budget process right now, something we're doing a little different. Department heads, myself, prior to them meeting with the council. And I want to recognize the new council as well, because they've really been working hand in hand with me as I work on these new programs. And then the Board of Ed budget, which is a big part of our budget, which we just talked about, which I'm supportive of, but I can't speak for the other council members. And then there's a number of other things on the agenda that are coming up, and I think as we get to items, I'd like the opportunity to speak.
Certainly.
So that's just the recap of our first 2 months. So we're
Thank you. You've been busy.
very busy.
Questions for the mayor? Mr. White?
Yeah, if I may, I think if I had my druthers, there are some requests from the fire departments for upgrades for some of their buildings that are significant because they're health concerns. We don't have the opportunity to have female and male quarters there. So I'm always thinking of Plan B for everything we do, right? But I would respectfully ask that the MARB consider those requests and take action on those requests so that I do have time if for some reason the MARB chose not to fund those requests. But I think it's important that we take a second look at those requests because that ARPA fund was earmarked by the city council for those fire buildings, which are archaic and almost 100 years old and need upgrades. I understand your concern and I'll allow the MARB at a future meeting to further discuss. All I would say is that they're all one taxpayer, whether the fire department pays or the city pays, it's the same taxpayer. Yeah, I think they've made a lot of progress and I would like the opportunity at the next MARB meeting to talk about all the progress they have made. They've made light year improvements over the past number of years. And I think they want to tell their story. We'll let them. Okay. Okay. All right.
That
Noted.
sounds like a preview of our next meeting, so staff needs to dig into that a little bit, please. Other questions for the mayor at this point? We've got a lot to do still, so we'll move on then. So we're going to have the Whittlesey Organizational Assessment presentation. This is under our Tier 4 Action Plan update. I think we're finally getting a full reveal of all the Whittlesey work to date at long last. I know we'd held some of this back, pending reforms that we didn't want to advertise needed to be made at the time, but so we have 4 final reports from Whittlesey, the West Haven Phase 1 report, some IT assessment reports regarding the city, the Public Safety Department, and the Board of Ed. Also included is in your packet is Mayor Boer's responses to the Whittlesey reports. Prior to the meeting today, MARB members and the city were provided draft copies of all of these reports. We have Mr. Edward Engberg and Chris Wisniewski from Whittlesey, and they'll be presenting these reports to the MARB.
Morning, Secretary Beckham and the board.
Good morning.
And my name is Chris Wisniewski. I am the manager of the IT services and IT assurance services cybersecurity divisions at Whittlesey. Key areas that we used to perform the assessment overall to look at the technology. Wow, we're really moving through these slides. It's okay. We do have an agenda. I'll keep it very tight out of respect for today. I understand that we have a lot to go over. The purpose of what I'd like to focus on really is the work that's been done. Look at the current state. As I look at these findings, again, this is executive summary, high level. We're not getting into the bits and bytes of things. We're going to kind of mention, hey, here's where West Haven was, here's where West Haven is, and here's where West Haven is going. So as we start and jump right into it, you know, Whittlesey as a whole, we do have that. There we go. Go down. More. We won't spend a lot of time here, but you know, we have an experienced certified team, IT professionals with years of experience. We do specialize in government and municipalities. So we having that expertise and background, we're able to bring that to the table when we perform these assessments. Yes, we do the audits. We do a whole scheme approach when we're doing assessments, audits, controls. We won't get into that of all of the different types. But the other piece to that that really helps is the security services, right? I'll keep saying the word IT. I'll try and stay away from acronyms, but information technology. In IT, that security is becoming a big deal, right? That's what we're trying to identify as where are those gaps and vulnerabilities that are going to expose West Haven as a whole. And so having that expertise in that team of cybersecurity kind of really coincides with looking at controls and information technology as a whole. So in our approach, we use the same team. We use the same folks when we did our assessment. There are 3 separate assessments, one of the city of West Haven, one of the public safety, which also includes animal control, and then one of the Board of Education. So 3 separate, assessments, but all of the same approach, the same scope, if you want to go to the next. So I understand there's a lot of bullets up there. I'm not going to go through these one by one, but the scope was the same approach for everything. We really want to get under the hood and really dig through. We had the bandwidth, we had the time, so we're able to really dig around. And as things came to light, we would dig a little bit deeper and we would traverse to other areas. So we really had a comprehensive understanding of West Haven and their departments as a whole. One of the things I think is important to point out is this isn't Whittlesey coming in, to put their thumb and say, yeah, we think the risk is here. This is how this works. No, we're using industry standard benchmarks. So no matter it's agnostic to whether Whittlesey came in or another firm, we're going to use the same things, the National Institution of Standard Technologies, cybersecurity framework, Center for Internet Security frameworks, common vulnerability security scoring systems. These are all industry benchmarks that are used across the world. So we're using this to ensure that it's not putting bias on what we're looking at internally. We add our expertise, but that just helps us to identify. So there's a lot of areas here that we looked at. These are at a high level. Obviously, when we look at the different points, we're going to expand on them. So, the network vulnerability is important. I think that's a big piece, right? That's where the cyber attackers, unauthorized users are really trying to get in at that perimeter. So it's very key. And I will say, again, trying to be very high level, a lot of the findings that you get when these assessments are done specifically for West Haven are at the vulnerability level, because attackers, we understand they're morphing every day, minute, hour. It doesn't stop. We can address things today. Tomorrow, we're going to have a bunch more. So that's where you tend to see a lot of the findings with those criticals and highs we'll see on the next page are under those vulnerabilities. Let's get into the findings. So as we look here, yes, up front, it's important to understand this is what we initially found, right? These were our findings when we performed the assessment. Sure, there's staggering numbers there. Those are high numbers. We look at the city of West Haven, there's high risk. 8 criticals and 31 high items. That's significant findings that we need to certainly acknowledge. Obviously, there's 10 mediums and 4 lows, but maybe just to expand real quick, when we say critical and high, critical is, all right, we need to stop what we're doing. We need to fix these like yesterday. These need to be addressed immediately. The highs, same thing. Might need a little evaluation, but these are some big red flags. We've got to address these now because there are severe vulnerabilities that the city of West Haven and the Board of Ed are exposed to. And so, this was alarming when we looked, but I will point out in fairness, we do hundreds of these. This is our expertise. Never gone anywhere and not found findings. There's always findings. There's always criticals and highs. That is going to be wherever you go. But 53 is a high number. Once we get down to public safety, to be very transparent, this is very rare that we do come up with a medium low risk on an assessment. I think that's worthy to say. So to only have a total of 27 total findings, you only have 5 critical and 2 high. they're doing a stupendous job. That is rare for us to come across. And again, we did the same scope. We did the same dive into things. So we didn't, look differently at anything. Board of Education, again, had some high risk there. 34 findings. There's some significant findings there. 5 critical, 14 high, and then you get into your medium and low. You know, another area just to make sure we point out, we'll talk about it in the remediation phase, but the Board of Education doesn't have their own internal IT. They use a third-party managed service provider that handles their IT. And so, it was certainly working with them directly, and they were excellent to work with along the way. Why don't we go to the next slide? This is kind of where I'd like to really spend our focus on. Okay, so while he pulls that up, the next slide is the important one, the remediation. Okay, this is where we are today. And this is something that I want to focus on because of the efforts that were made by all the different departments. The City of West Haven, you can see there, remember, they had 53 findings. As of current, they only have 3 remaining. The hundreds that I've done, I can't think of many others that have remediated 50 findings in approximately 6 months. That is unbelievable. Not only did Jermaine and his team, at the direction of David Taylor, not only did they remediate this, they did this down a person also. So they're down staff. For them to accomplish this is just incredible. So they only have 2 high findings and 1 medium left to remediate. And I can speak to those 3, that those 3 are longer term. We just can't put a completion date on them. I'll explain what those 3 are on the next slide, our final slide. But those last 3 are in progress. They are being done, and they're just a little more long term. Public safety, remembering that they had a total of, I believe, 27, if I'm right with my numbers. They only have 1 critical and 1 high left. Sergeant Thompson and his team also have done a fabulous job at addressing these. So when we took these reports in draft and gave them to each of the IT departments, all 3 of them jumped on these. There was no pushback to us. The cooperation level from all 3 departments, and including, the third-party provider for the Board of Ed, were incredible to work with. They gave us everything right up front. They were very prompt, responsive, and that's what made this a successful assessment, is having that. So again, for public safety and Sergeant Thompson's team, jumped on these, did an awesome job with trying to remediate as quick as possible. There are still 11, but they're in process. And something to be stated is those 11 aren't just relying on his team. Most of those are all third party. So there's vendor dependent, meaning there may be servers or software that their team doesn't handle. They're not responsible for. They contract out with the vendors. So it takes a little time to kind of coordinate that. But everything is addressed and in process. The last piece, the Board of Education, again, there's only 17 left out of 34, only 1 critical and 7 high, 7 medium and 2 low. Again, understand the Board of Ed has a huge environment, massive. So we need to take that into consideration, that there's a lot of endpoints, there's different schools, there's things like that that we're looking at here. So there's significant remediation. The third-party managed service provider, again, been very responsive to jump on these, do what they can. Some of the findings to remediate here, for instance, maybe around physical security, are a little more long-term. You can't just make those changes on a whim. So there may be budget included in there. And so it takes a little bit longer. But I will say, strictly from the standpoint of working with each of their departments, we had constant check-ins. We had a remediation matrix that each of them worked off of to provide us with evidence. Everything at this point is really in conversation of what they've given us for their remediation efforts. As you can see, considering the initial findings, West Haven and the Board of Ed and Public Safety are in a much more secure spot. to protect against that unauthorized access or exposure of any data, not just for internal, but for citizens and clients that they're dealing with. We're in a much better spot, and I feel much more comfortable as they continue to look forward. If we want to jump to the last slide, where are we going? This is the most important piece. We've identified it. We've remediated. Well, we need to prevent any of this from happening in the future. So there has to be ongoing attention to this. So we're going to implement IT governance. We've already started meeting with the mayor. We've had some conversations, and we're in the middle of scheduling this. This IT governance is going to be with the assistance of Whittlesey. We're going to come in and help chair these meetings where we're going to have stakeholders from every department. We're going to have folks from public safety, folks from Board of Ed, and also from the city and the mayor's office. We're all going to come together at the table, and we're going to talk about our strategic initiatives of what are we trying to do here for information technology as a whole? What's our goals? Let's all combine these. Let's get on the same page and make sure we're all in agreement that we're trying to get the right strategy for next year, 3 years, 5 years. Look at the bigger issues, bring them to the table. We want to bounce off each area to be able to utilize that expertise. So this IT governance will help oversee also the remediation efforts that are remaining to ensure are addressed, to make sure that they're completed and we're in a better spot. The second bullet there is very important, is a validation assessment. It's great that we did this assessment. It's just like going for a physical to a doctor, right? You think you're good until you go get your assessment, you go get your physical, and they find things. But that's why we do this, to kind of get a pulse. But this needs to go on an annual basis, and that is what's going to happen. So that validation assessment is important because, as I mentioned, when we talked in regards to remediation efforts, it's really what each department has only provided us. We need to now come in and perform that same assessment along the same parameters to really ensure technically that all of those items were remediated and addressed. So we're going to do that this year, and this assessment will go on an annual basis. You will see all of those gaps and those findings really reduced down. That risk will be a lot lower, and it will help identify new things that happen. The last piece there is what we call a written information security program. This is really what's, we say best practice, but it's driven by a lot of different agencies, cybersecurity insurance, and that piece talks about an overall program that incorporates different policies and documents to ensure that each department is doing what they need to do to protect. What kind of administrative, technical, and physical controls are we doing to make sure that the city is protected at all times? And we have those in place and implemented. They're being reviewed, they're being evaluated. So as a whole, like I said, I want to focus on that remediation piece. The efforts that the city has made is outstanding in such a short period of time to bring it to a point of having confidence that there is protection around the city's employee internal data and also citizen data.
Thank you. That's great news. Compliments to David and the hardworking staff there who've been at that with you for months now, I know. Questions of the board regarding the Whittlesey reports? Wow. What a difference a few months makes.
Yes.
Well, nice job. Keep at it. We've made great progress. So with that, we'll move on to a presentation concerning, I'm sorry, we got the finance manager, Protivity is with us today to talk about.
Actually, excuse me,
Are
Secretary.
they not with us?
Oh, all
I'm
right.
sorry. A copy of the status report provided by Protivity is provided for the MARB members to review. Do we need to discuss that, or is there any question about that, or no?
I think that we can pass unless anybody wants to. Okay. And they can always provide us with additional comment
Okay.
for a later meeting.
So they're embedded with the city, helping them carry out the reforms that Whittlesey has identified and other reforms that the city's identified. And so that work's ongoing, and I'm sure we'll hear from them in person soon.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Then Our next item is a presentation regarding a bond issuance and bond anticipation note issuance and a result thereof. This is for the information of the board. And I think we have, let's see, the city's had credit reviews with 2 rating agencies related to these debt issuances, with S&P Global Ratings raising its, as the mayor indicated, raising its long-term rating to BBB+ from BBB, with the outlook being positive on West Haven's outstanding GO bonds. Mr. Taylor and Mr. Lindsay from Munistat Services are available to review this issuance with us. Included in your meeting package is a summary of the sale. Mr. Taylor.
Introduce, but
Oh, sorry.
Lindsay will bring you all the data. I just want to say it was a great experience for us, very thrilling. So Bill, if you could take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, David. So this is Bill Lindsay from Munistat Services. I am the city's municipal advisor for debt issuance. And we wanted to just briefly bring you up to date on the results of the city's sale. So the city sold 18.2 million in general obligation bonds and 10.1 million in general obligation bond anticipation notes back on February 1st. This was a negotiated sale process. It included the underwriting team of Raymond James as lead manager and Piper Sandler as co-manager. And as the mayor and the secretary mentioned, heading into the sale, the city did seek credit ratings from both Moody's Investor Service and Standard & Poor's. Moody's affirmed the city's underlying bond rating at Baa3 with a stable outlook, so no changes from Moody's. But happy to report that Standard & Poor's did upgrade the city's underlying bond rating to BBB+ from BBB, and then also applied a positive outlook, which is quite unusual and certainly encouraging. Standard & Poor's reported in their noted in their report, I should say, excuse me, that the upgrade was really a result of continued improved financial performance, specifically 2022, and you heard from the auditor about the results of 22, and then projections for a surplus in 23 as well. They mentioned improvements in internal controls, both in finance and then in changes in IT, which you just heard about. But I think it's important to note that in no small part, the MARB's guidance here and the assistance of both Whittlesley and Protiviti were noted by Standard & Poor's as an improvement and an ongoing positive for the city. And I think that was largely reflected in that the positive outlook. With respect to the actual issuance, so we're happy to report that the city qualified for municipal bond insurance on both its long-term bonds as well as the short-term notes. The insurance was provided by Build America Mutual, or BAM. And where it's not uncommon to insure long-term bonds, it is a little unusual to insure short-term notes. But happy to report that the cost-benefit analysis performed by the underwriting team and confirmed by us showed a benefit to insuring the short-term notes. It was a savings of at least $17,000 in interest. But when I talk about the subscription number of orders that the city received on the notes, I think it was very clear that the use of the insurance on the short-term notes really benefited the transaction. With respect to the long-term bonds, which were 20-year bonds, the estimate is that the city saved $666,000 in debt service over the 20-year life of the bonds by insuring them with BAM. And then I also wanted to mention to you that on a positive note, the cost of the bond insurance decreased for the city on this issuance. It had been 100 basis points back in 2021. It dropped to 58 basis points in this issuance. And that really was significant because it demonstrated that the bond insurer felt that there was less risk in insuring the city's bonds this time out versus just 3 years ago. In terms of the actual pricing, so the city, again, they priced $18.2 million in bonds. The bonds had a final maturity of 20 years, and the structure of the bonds was declining principal, meaning it was higher in the the short term or the nearer maturities and then declining the longer maturities, which was a result of the types of assets that were financed. A number of them had shorter useful lives, things like police and public works vehicles, public works equipment, and then information technology equipment. So we amortized those over either 5 or 10 years, which was ever appropriate for the asset. So it kind of gave this unique structure where there were more bonds in the near term. But that was well received by the investment community. And we're happy to say all the bonds were oversubscribed, as much as 8 times oversubscribed. The city received a total of $146 million in orders when they were only selling 18 million in bonds. So a significant oversubscription. The city received orders from 35 different investors, and it covered, the gamut of investor classes, including retail investors, bank portfolios, bond funds, separately managed accounts, money managers, and hedge funds, as well as an insurance company. The number of orders and the variety of investors was very encouraging, to the financing team, because it increased over the last time the city had come to market. Back in 2021, the city received 83 orders for 142 million. It was a roughly a 7-time oversubscription. Here we had 146 million in orders and an 8-time oversubscription. So continued to see strong investor interest in the city's bonds, which we feel sets up the city well for future issuances, next year, the year after, when the city comes back to market. That strong subscription level allowed the underwriters to reduce the yield spreads on the bonds anywhere between 4 and 20 basis points on the day of pricing, which saved the city an additional $170,000 in interest. And then on the note side, the city had sold it's 10.1 million in 1-year notes. The all-in cost on the notes was a 4.5%. They had a 5% coupon and a 3.7% reoffering yield. On the note issue, the city received a total of $64 million in orders versus only 10 million for sale. It was a 6.3% oversubscription. They had a total of 8 investors placed orders for the notes. 6 of them placed orders for the entire amount of the notes. And again, due to that strong interest, the city was able, the underwriters, were able to reduce the interest cost by 5 basis points on the day of pricing, which saved the city approximately another $5,000 in interest cost. So happy to report that overall the sale went very, very well. We saw increased interest in both the amount of orders in dollars, as well as the number of orders and the number of investors who participated, and the reduction in the bond insurance costs by BAM was reflective of the increased rating from Standard & Poor's, as well as, I think, the overall positive direction of the city.
Thank you, sir. Questions concerning the bond sale? Good news. More good news. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll move on. We have another item here: review, discussion, and possible action on a labor contract. This is a contract we've seen before. It's a tentative agreement between the West Haven Police Local 895, UPSEU, the MARB. So we've had this before us before. And the MARB understood that the police union was requesting guidance from the board as to the level and areas of savings that may be acceptable to the board in a new agreement. To that end, at the meeting in September 14, 2023, the MARB deferred providing full guidance until its next meeting due to materials being incomplete, as the board members expressed at that meeting. In the October 17 meeting package were items from the previous MARB meeting that included the tentative agreement, which had officers hired prior to 2009 contributing 9.5% of base pay for their pension contribution instead of 10%, an analysis by the city's actuary Milliman, and a summary of the cost impact of pension plan agreement with the police department.
A letter to the MARB from the West Haven Police Union clarifying many of these items from the tentative agreement was provided. Also included in this package were copies of the red line version of the City of West Haven's Police Department pension plan, the red line version of the MOU to modify the collective bargaining agreement relating to the pension plan and retiree medical benefits. In addition, the city's analysis of Connecticut municipalities' pension plans was based on OPM's Municipal Fiscal Indicators Report. This meeting package provided today, with one revision to the tentative agreement, corrected the pension contribution that I mentioned before to 10%. So the board members reiterated in a prior meeting that relevant information is missing and was required for the board to take action. The following is a list of information that remains incomplete or missing. We'd like a red line copy of the deferred retirement option plan, the drop plan. The drop plan language in the tentative agreement is vague. We would like a revised tentative agreement for the police pension that deals with the extraneous collective bargaining language that's in the agreement. It's got some other things in there unrelated to pensions, and we'd like a corrected version that takes out that extraneous material. We'd like a summary of the cost impact of the pension plan agreement. It doesn't not include supporting documentation concerning police turnover and retention that accounts for the 240,000 annual savings that is noted there. We'd like some documentation about how that turnover and retention would account for that savings. The following is a list of total cost data information for the agreement that has not been provided to support the proposed changes to the plan. The deferred contribution plan comparison to the proposed defined benefit plan to determine that the benefit to reopening the closed defined benefit plan. So we need some documentation around that, comparing those plans and what's the benefit of reopening that closed plan. Financial data reflecting each police officer's pension benefits and the impact for each officer of the new plan. We'd like some data that supports the turnover over the past 10 years, that supports the retention benefit that is touted or claimed for this new plan. We would like some data supporting the cost of the 8% buyback program to each police officer. So there's some outstanding information. We'll have comments and discussion in a moment, I'm sure, about members' concerns overall, so that can inform the way forward. But I wanted to recognize the mayor who asked to be heard on this item.
Thank you, Secretary. So we'll be able to get that list in writing. Right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so I wasn't here in the original presentation, but when the $10,000, when the retention bonus was given, but I just want to comment on that. And the reason I want to comment on the salary and the retention that was given to the police officers is because I just want to reiterate that that funding brought the West Haven officers from the lowest, we saw a pattern here today, right? The low salaries in West Haven, from one of the lowest municipalities to just below the average. So it's not as if the police officers are coming here for our salary. It made a difference, right? It's an improvement. But if you compare us to some of the other municipalities, some of the maxes, our max is around 72,000. We'll have this in the information that you're asking for, as compared to a municipality, other municipalities in the New Haven region, for example. Hampton's max is 93, Wallingford's 83, Stratford is 81. So some of these other municipalities around us, their maximum is 10,000 and sometimes 20,000 more than ours. And the reason, again, that I bring the salary up is because when you're looking to go work for a municipality, the salary is one side of the equation. The retirement package is the other side. So I think there's been improvements in the salary, although again, we still fall below the average, but I think the retirement package is something that's significant as well. And some of our new recruits that we're trying to entice to West Haven are looking at the other municipalities that have the pension program. And with our 401k program, there's no benefit for their families as well. And I want to make sure we take that into consideration. We just had one of our newest officers was shot in an incident. Thankfully, he's okay. God forbid something happened to him or other officers. There is no component for their family. So the retirement is very important to them. Obviously, they put themselves at risk and in extreme danger. Want to make sure they're taken care of. With respect to our existing officers, incentive that's built in is because we have a significant gap between our veteran and our seasoned officers with our new officers. So that institutional knowledge and that experience that they bring to the table is critical for us, especially when we are down, the number of officers that we are down. And that incentive is to, retain them and keep them here for additional years so that we don't have a mass exodus. We are significantly, we have a number of vacancies. And when you look at the vacancies, if you want to look at it at dollars and cents, I would advise, recommend, not advise, you to take a look at as well at our overtime budget. So last year's overtime was $683,000 in West Haven. We're already at $570,000 for overtime in West Haven. Now, some of that comes back to us through construction reimbursement, but we're still higher than the surrounding municipalities. And that's because we have those vacancies and because we have those shortages. So our officers are working long and more shifts, which is contributing to that financial strain on our overtime budget. And then the other thing I want to mention is what it costs to train the officers. And what's happening is it costs about $120,000 between the training and covering the shifts. The officers come to us and then they leave. So we've lost 37 officers since the change in the pension plan, and 80% of those have indicated it's because of our pension. So that's data that's been tracked based on exit interviews. Some of them have been retirements, but a number have been regarding the pension. So again, I want to emphasize, I'm grateful that we increased the salary. I think that was important. But I think we also need to look at the pension. I don't think that was the end of the story with the salary, because when anybody is going to look to work somewhere, you look at the entire package, right? And what it means financially for yourself and for your family. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues that have a little bit more information regarding the structure of the finances.
We could do that. I think what I would like to do is have the board indicate where we are, because I think what we need to do going forward under the statute is give you an opportunity to respond to what our concerns are, bring back a new version of the plan or not, and then we'll have to move on from there. So why don't we do that now? And then you'll have the opportunity in the period, I believe it's 10 days after today, under the statute, to give a revised plan or a revised response. So I'll just start off and say that for me, the ADEC cost in the out years was, I thought, excessive. It's another $500,000, I believe, in the fifth year, and that would be true into the future. It's a big nut. We are at the state level doing what we can to bend the curve on our long-term unfunded liability with regard to pension and health. So I think that's going in the wrong direction. If that were a much smaller impact to your ADEC, I'd be more open to it. If you could figure out a way to make that smaller than 500,000 a year, I'd be more open to it, but that's a big problem I have. I'll turn it over to other members of the board if they have other thoughts. Mr. Hamilton.
I think I've expressed some of these opinions in the prior meeting as well, but I am personally sympathetic to the recruitment issue in terms of having, eliminated the defined benefit plan for new hires quite a number of years ago. And so I personally am open to reestablishing a defined benefit plan for folks who are not currently in the defined benefit plan. The area where I have a problem with what's been put on the table is I don't have the same feeling with respect to the a deficiency, if you will, in the legacy defined benefit plan for the employees who are in the department who are in the defined benefit plan. I think that and if you look at the cost, and certainly ultimately at the end of the day, where the board is coming from is about, as the secretary said, about the cost to the city. The biggest portion of the cost, as I recall, was increasing the benefit for the employees who are already in the legacy and more frankly, the richer defined benefit plan. So it was the increase there, the 5% increase in pension calculations that drives 2.6 million a year total cost. So I'm not supportive of that provision. And I also have serious concerns about the changes to retiree benefits, given the fact that West Haven essentially has no OPEB trust fund, has hundreds of millions of dollars of unfunded liability associated with your retiree benefits, retiree health benefits, as it is now, to take steps that increase that liability further, I just don't think is justified in this case. The issue of a drop program, if there were enough, if there was enough documentation to demonstrate that it truly was cost neutral, that's an area that I could potentially be persuaded on. So those are my specific opinions on it. And again, based on, what the secretary said in terms of impact on the ADEC and the total cost to the city, plus the fact that we now know that the market was not good to your pension plan in 22, has created a bigger hole that's going to have to be filled in any event. So I have some real concerns about the proposal as it's been presented here.
Other members of the board have any guidance or thoughts in terms of, I'm sorry, Mark is on the line. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I share Tom's concern and concerns is as in fact, in the last meeting, I thought that we were very specific about what at least some of us would consider moving forward, and that was that all new hires as of a certain date would be in the defined benefit plan. The gappers, or the people that were ineligible, would be given the opportunity, one-time opportunity, to re-enter the plan. So for that group, those gappers, they would have to decide and limit it to that issue. Anything outside of that issue, I couldn't support. Those issues need to be developed through the normal collective bargaining process rather than through a midstream process that's questionable to begin with. So my question, Mr. Secretary, is I think we have to reject the proposed agreement, and then the 10-day clock starts. And I believe legal might opine on this. Both parties could waive the 10-day limit to give them time to come back with hopefully an agreement limited to the areas that we've discussed. But I just need clarification because obviously we don't want to get into timeline and mandate violations. That's all.
Thank you, Mark. I'm advised that we do have a 10-day period now, and I do understand we need to reject it to start that clock. I think it's time to do that so we can move this item to some resolution. It's been with us for a couple months for more information. We've asked for more information today. We've also given feedback on what we object about the plan. If you choose to give us a new plan in the next 10 days that we could consider. Mr. White? Thank you. Mr. Alvarez.
Maybe two things. One, for my understanding, if what's being suggested is that we would vote to reject this proposal, they would then have 10 days to come back to us with a new proposal. Is 10 days from the amount of information that you had just listed, is 10 days a realistic period of time by which to do that? Because otherwise, by us not rejecting this, would there be some requirement that it would then go into effect, or would that be our option to give them more time to come back? That's my first sort of part.
I could address that. My name is Chris Hodgson from Birch and Moses, representing.
Let me just reclaim the mic. The list was not new. The list was a reminder of what we at previous meetings had asked for and haven't received yet. So I think 10 days is ample time for them to produce additional information. Unless the board disagrees with me, happy to be corrected by a majority of the board. But my thought is they've had ample time to pull this together and have ample time now to do so. Let me recite some of the statute here. The parties to the agreement have 10 days from the date of rejection to consider our concerns, as we've outlined in detail, both at this meeting and prior meetings, and propose a modified agreement if you so choose. At the expiration of the 10-day period, the MARB has to approve or reject the modified agreement. If we're unable to reach a modified agreement or we reject the modified agreement, the MARB, under the statute, has to impose binding arbitration on the issues identified by the MARB as the cause of the rejection. And we will have to appoint an arbitrator, and we've done some research and are prepared to do so. Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think the concern with the 10 days wasn't what we could gather. I think that the union has a clause because they have to get their membership to vote. So I'm not sure what that period of time is. Chris, okay.
Morning, my name is John Walsh. I'm here on behalf of the West Haven Police Union. And I had the privilege of addressing you on October 17th. As you're aware, the union has filed a writ of mandamus in Superior Court. So I can tell you the union would, if the board is going to reject, let me start again. The union feels, as the Board of Education did, that we have a legally binding agreement. Board of Ed, the union's attorney said, you stood in the shoes of the municipality, you had 30 days.
Sir, are you speaking to the question of whether or not you'd have time to vote? Because we're not going to litigate this here.
I know you're not. I'm just trying to give you a little background so you can understand my position.
I understand your position, sir.
That is our
We're going to
position.
vote to move. We're going to accept or reject, and then we're going to have a 10-day period, and then we're going to go forward under the statute, which we don't have any flexibility to waive the 10 days or give you a longer period of time anyway. So,
well, if you don't have, that's fine. I was simply going to say to you, after I made that comment before I was interrupted, I was going to say that the union has a process it has to go through with its union body. So the 10-day period within which, if the parties were able to come to an agreement before we bring that to our body, it's a near impossibility to get it to our body within that time frame. If you're telling me you have no discretion under the statute, then I guess it is what it is at that point.
that's my advice. So the statute was written with that understanding that you'd have 10 days, whatever that takes. So is there further discussion from the board? Any questions or comments to be made? Questions for anyone? Mr. Alvarez.
Just a comment quickly, because Mr. White, one of the comments that you made earlier, and I completely respect your position and where you're coming from. I just think the city of West Haven is not simply in the position that it's in because it didn't watch its finances for 20 years. It's in the position that it's in because it is poor and economically disadvantaged. And so a lot of the municipalities, because we are structured the way that we are in the state, have to have extremely high taxes to fund basic services amongst the poorest residents of Connecticut. And so I think we often malign our more poor communities, despite them having probably considerably more restrictive expenditures in terms of salaries, in terms of benefits, than any of our wealthy communities. But those wealthy communities are never suggested that they are not watching their finances because they are wealthy enough to afford whatever they want, where cities like West Haven cannot. And I just want to say that because I know that the position that they are in is because of a lot of factors, but one of the major factors is the fact that they are in economically disadvantaged communities and our state is designed the way that it is. And for the last 20 years, the state did not make its pilot payments to West Haven. It still does not make its full pilot payment to West Haven. It's at 50% of what the state owes them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Alvarez. I don't think the city of West Haven is here because it's poor. I think it's here because it was poorly governed and created a high risk of loss, which was demonstrated by the prior administration, allowing someone to control a large amount of money that they made off with. That has nothing to do with the demographics or the economic situation in the city. So we need to move on to the relevant matter before us. Mr. Biller? Well, I would defer to a majority of the board if they wanted to do that, if you wanted to make a motion to that regard. But we've been reminded that there's a legal action that they consider themselves already with an agreement that they're going to execute. So if we drag this out any further, we're at risk in that litigation, the writ of mandamus, I believe. So this has been around for several months. I think it's time that we give clarity to everyone and take a position as a board and move this along and let the statute work. Statute was designed for this situation. It may not be convenient or easy for everyone, but it's what the statute says. So I think we ought to go ahead and pull the trigger. But I defer to the board. If you want to make a motion to do something other than approve or reject today, we can discuss that. I'm happy if you're talking about a statutory interpretation. Yes, I'm happy for you to do that in public.
Can't hear him.
Okay.
Ability for the board to wait for more information. It's not there. It's either approve or disapprove. Within the next 10 days, if the police union comes back with a modified agreement, then we can vote. But they do not have to come back with anything. It's their option. It's on them to come back. If they come back with nothing, then there's been no change and it goes to arbitration. And there's no more vote. So where we are today is we need to have a vote up or down, and then the clock starts.
Mr. Waxenberg, you still have your hand up. Do you want to speak or are you?
Well, I'm willing to make a motion to reject.
Any other? Mr. Hamilton seconds. Any other discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion to reject this contract, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Alvarez opposes. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda.
Review, discussion, and possible actions on non-labor contracts. We have a contract for a municipal fleet vehicle purchase from Gengras Ford, Ford F-350 for $66,395 to replace an inoperable 2000 Ford Ranger in the building maintenance department. This purchase is off the state contract and is included in the fleet maintenance capital plan. West Haven Subcommittee at its prior meeting recommended that the vehicle purchase be sent to the full MARB for consideration. City can provide an overview. Ford trucks.
Very well introduced the matter. Secretary, it is
I have a good staff.
on a state contract, and the city would like to purchase this vehicle.
Any questions about the Ford F-350? I'll entertain a motion concerning this purchase. Motion from Mr. Biller, seconded by Mr. Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. A sidewalk, curb, patch, and paving contract with Kalana Concrete and Asphalt Paving LLC. Publicly bid project by the city. 5 bids were received. This was the low bidder. Scope of work is repair and replacement of sidewalks, driveways, and curbs. Replacement patching for repair of roads with set pricing over a 2-year term. I don't think I have the number for the contract, the actual pricing, but I guess it's on a per project basis.
There's a little bit of a TBD depending on some of the patching repairs and whatnot, but you can find they are estimates, but these are I believe you have the most current version without any write-ups. But down there, you can see that, we're looking 20,000 square feet of concrete, 2,000 square feet. Paving, about 10,000 square feet of box. There, and it's 2 different.
Any questions about this contract? It's recommended by the subcommittee for approval by the full board. Mr. White moves and Mr. Biller seconds approval of this contract. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Any abstentions? We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Allentown Fire Department cab and chassis replacement, also from Gengras Ford. A new cab and chassis for an Allentown rescue unit. This is in lieu of purchasing a brand new ambulance, so I guess they're going to retrofit an older machine vehicle. Let's see here. The original price was $57,820. However, a diesel engine was not quoted. So with a diesel engine, the cost is $67,544. Again, off the state contract, funded out of the Allentown Fire Department operating budget. Subcommittee met and approved this and recommended to the full board their consideration. Questions of the city concerning the cab and chassis replacement? I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Biller moves, Ms. Hammersley seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move on. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the West Haven Police Department vehicle purchase, also from Gengras Ford, a 2024 Ford Expedition and a 2024 Ford F-20 crew cab. The Expedition is $62,230. The crew cab is $53,108 for the police department. These are off the state contract and are funded through the approved 5-year capital plan using bond funds. The subcommittee met and approved and recommended to the full MARB for their consideration and approval. Any questions of the city about these purchases? I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Biller moves. Mr. Alvarez seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, West Haven Police Department Investigative Division purchase. This is a 2024 Ford Transit van for $52,934. It's off the state contract, funded through a bond funds apparently, and the subcommittee did not take this one up, I gather. So this is new to the board. Any questions of the city concerning this Ford Transit van for the investigative division? I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Biller moves. Mr. Alvarez seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. West Haven Police Department telephone and cabling upgrades for the Sawmill Road Police Station. Quote from Harbor Networks to provide and install a network infrastructure at the West Haven Police Department that includes recabling of the building, hardware and implementation. This quote is from the interlocal purchasing system that both Harbor Networks and the City of West Haven, of which both the Harbor Networks and the City of West Haven are members. The project is funded by a state grant of $275,000. Is this Urban Act?
Good memory.
All righty then. Former chairman of the bonding subcommittee apparently got some money from the state. Congratulations. Then they're going to buy some cabling and telephone equipment. Questions of the city? Yes, Mr. White. Mr. White moves. Mr. Alvarez seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. West Haven Police Department cybersecurity software package. Purchase is for the West Haven Police Station. Sorry, it's also Sawmill Road Police Station. A quote for $87,048 is from CrowdStrike Solution Group at Carasoft Technology Group to provide cybersecurity software solution. Say that 3 times fast for the West Haven Police Department. It's for a 3-year service term. It's being purchased through a contract with Omnia Partners, a purchasing cooperative that the city through which the city has purchased items in the past. It's funded with bond funds as well. Questions about the cybersecurity software package? Entertain a motion. Mr. White moves. Mr. Biller seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Ayes have it. The motion carries. We'll move on to the next item, which is a food insecurity grant using ARPA funds for the Living Word Ministries, also known as the Vertical Church. They've opened a newly renovated Dream Center located on Center Street. It's designed to combat food insecurity in the city as well as handling clothing donations. ARPA grants is for $150,000 to offset some of the building costs, equipment, and needed supplies for the center. The initial contract needed a revision, which I assume you did. Oh,
Put it in this.
in the package. Great. Any questions about this item? Mr. White.
Establish a new food policy council where we brought all the religious organizations, our Board of Health, our education together to identify funding in the future to address our food insecurity, which we're at about 13%.
Moved by Mr. White, seconded by Mr. Alvarez. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item, which is another food insecurity grant for New Reach, which is a deliverable food service to West Haven families in need. It's using ARPA funding as well. $75,000 grant approved by the ARPA committee and the city council, reviewed by our subcommittee. It's a reimbursable grant whereby New Reach would submit invoices to the ARPA committee at the city for review and approval of payments for the grant or from the grant. Any questions about this grant? Do I hear a motion? Moved by Ms. Hammersley. Oh, one question from Mr. White.
We actually were considering doing a second round. There's about 400,000 in total for food insecurity to a number of organizations. But as we recently met 2 weeks ago, we identified some new opportunities. We'd also like to put more funding towards our pantries in our schools.
Motion by Mr. White to approve, seconded by Mr. Biller. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the next item, Black and Beach Group Engineering Services Amendment for Public Works. City signed a contract in September 22 with Black & Veatch to provide engineering and technical services at the Water Pollution Control Facility for $40,000. City's looking to continue this arrangement with an amendment to the agreement for $65,000. The amendment causes the contract to exceed $50,000, therefore requiring the board's approval. Funding is from the Water Pollution Control budget in the engineering account. Any questions about this item? Entertain a motion. Moved by Mr. Alvarez. Seconded by Ms. Hammersley. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the last item, which seems anticlimactic at this point. Review and discussion of the monthly financial report for December of 2023. Mayor Borer.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to the next item, while we're still on the non-labor contracts, I think this is a good place to say this. I understand how valuable everybody's time is. Meeting 2 months, every 2 months for non-labor contracts is a challenge for us. So if you look at the food insecurity contract, for example, we presented that 4 months ago. We had a challenge with it on our end that we needed to fix. You recommended, but then it's another 2 months. So it's taken a little time for us to get these contracts approved in a city of our size and our operation. It would be great if we could maybe have the non-labor contracts considered midstream somehow.
Yeah, we can look at the schedule and do things as needed. We can call special meetings. Obviously, we approved the schedule of regular meetings. When is the next regular meeting?
It's not till April. We do have a subcommittee, but we're looking to make some changes for.
We may need to have a meeting in 10 days for other reasons. So if you've got some non-labor agreements ready in 10 days, we can do it then. But we can obviously schedule special meetings as if you have a batch of them and you need to get them done, let us know and we can see if we can get the group together. So what happened in December with the monthly financial report?
It's all good.
I appreciate your brevity. We have materials in our packet, I assume. Do members have questions about the December financials? You have a quick summary where we are?
It was another good month. A couple of things to report. You have favorability investment income. Building planning and zoning fees are at 9% now. A delay in bonding, which is saving us interest and further savings as described by Bill today. Looking at about $3 million between those savings and the revenue, which we're in the middle of looking at expenses right now. So I'm not ready to give you any bigger projection than that. But just to say that January was a great month, got everything we expected from the state, from the residents. January report, it's really going to look great. Taxes, that's what I mean.
Questions for the city? All righty then. Thank you for coming. Other business. So the February 29 West Haven Subcommittee meeting is to be rescheduled. So the West Haven Subcommittee meeting will not be happening next week. We're going to reschedule that. We may have a tentative meeting in March, a special meeting, as we discussed earlier today. Any other business for the good of the order? Move to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.